Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching today's Ag Forecast brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions, your premier platform for real-time global insights. Well, there are a lot of things that are getting set up right now that are going to bring quite a bit of change here to North America. And we're going to start with the jet stream level winds here across the Pacific, specifically three features. One will be this way upstream trough that's over Japan. Two will be the troughs developing here in the Gulf of Alaska. And the third piece is this ridge that's over the western part of the United States. You see, we're going to be watching how this trough plus this trough and these three circulations, see 1, 2, 3, that are all sitting under that ridge, are all going to be interacting together to break this ridge down. And that's going to bring in a large pattern change to North America. In addition to that, we have to be watching the tropics over on the Atlantic side of things as well, specifically what's been going on over the weekend in the Gulf of Mexico and the Caribbean. We did see the emergence over the weekend of Tropical Storm Gamma. We're going to talk about where Gamma is going to go in a few moments. But the more important storm, I think, to North America is going to be what's behind it. Right here, as of early this morning, about 3:45 this morning, this was still Tropical Depression number 26. But as we work our way through the morning, we're probably going to see this system get the name. So this could become Tropical Storm Delta. Meanwhile, midday today, when you look across the United States, relatively stagnant flow across parts of the southeast getting over to the Ohio Valley. But look at these strong southerly winds coming up through the midsection of the United States. There is a weak frontal boundary in through this area, but things are relatively dry at this point, and as a result, not much precipitation across the U.S. as we look throughout the day today. Really, it's going to only be down here around parts of Florida, a little bit in the northeast, and a couple of showers skirting along the U.S.-Canada border toward the Great Lakes. So if this is our background and setup, let's dig right on into this. Our La Nina is still here, and this is going to be an important component to the second half of this hurricane season. The La Nina, as you can see here, we still have our ocean temperatures down here around that negative 0.8 to negative 1 degrees Celsius range, and the trade winds are quite strong. So this feature here is going to be discussed now for the next several months. It is certainly in our flow pattern, and it's starting to really affect the circulation of the atmosphere. Do notice we've seen some cooling here in the Gulf of Alaska underneath several of these deep troughs and quite a bit of cloud cover. That's critical. But notice we're still quite warm here in much of the Atlantic. We're going to be watching for storm systems to develop. But it's going to be a bit of a change in where the storm systems develop. Now, I bring back a figure I show you quite a bit. This is the frequency of tropical systems, both hurricanes and tropical storms, from NOAA. We know that the peak of the season is right here around September 10th. Now, normally, as we work our way toward the beginning of October, we see a pretty large drop in the number of systems. But there is this secondary peak that always shows up in the data. And what this secondary peak represents is the fact that as you go from September, where we have such a broad swath over which we could get tropical cyclone development, that tends to shift as we get into the month of October and really get focused right here in the Caribbean, the Gulf of Mexico, and along the east coast of the United States. So we lose the African easterly waves that often trigger these tropical systems. That doesn't mean they can't happen, but historically, we're more likely to see features forming in the Gulf of Mexico, the Caribbean, and along the East Coast. Now, a couple of interesting things happened over the last several weeks. Here along the East Coast, our wind shear values have really jumped way back up above average. It's been the same thing in the Gulf of Mexico. From mid-September to now, the wind shear values have really climbed, and that's what helped pull back this extremely active tropical cyclone season. Here was the other features. Look at this. From the 20th of October to the 20th of September, what we tended to have was the MJO stuck in a configuration which promoted systems to develop here in the main development region of the Atlantic. And then they got over here toward the United States, and we've since seen what they've done. But now let's look at the time period of the 20th of September now to the 2nd of October. The MJO has moved over into phases 4, 5, and 6 and is sitting here. And as a result, we've actually had quite a bit of suppressing motion in the upper levels of the atmosphere. And of course, that had an impact on South America as well, which we're going to talk about at the end of this video. So what's the MJO doing now? Well, it's still there. It's over here in phase 4 and 5 and not forecast to go anywhere. So what this means is all of our best upper level motion is here. We are suppressing waves coming off of Africa, but really, as you get over toward the United States, we don't have much of a lid on the flow for stuff coming out of the Caribbean, the Gulf of Mexico, or along the East Coast. So that's why we're going to watch those areas most carefully in the near term. So when we just look back yesterday, this is a satellite animation here. It's going to stop right as the sun was setting in the midsection of the United States. sheets, you can see the large kind of stream of moisture that was coming here off of the northern edge of Gamma. And that produced some very heavy rainfall that did move through parts of Florida and just off the East Coast. You can even see the upper level low that's still spinning here over parts of the Great Lakes, which has actually given us a very chilly morning here. We'll talk about that in just a few moments. But as we let this go to the very end and just pause it right there at the very end, here we go again, we'll see that we're still dealing with quite a bit of a forest fire here along and through California, also in parts of Montana. And this fire we've been watching very carefully right here on the border of Colorado and Wyoming. This one's been spreading quite a bit of smoke over the last about week now across this part of the front range of the Rocky Mountains. There is relief coming, and we got to talk about the change that's going to get us there, because when you look back over the last 72 hours, it was really just this weekend, some lightly scattered showers coming through this area, curling around that upper level low that went through the Great Lakes. We even had some lake-enhanced showers, rain showers that formed here, and some of this kind of compiled here in parts of the Northeast. But there was a pretty sharp divide here as to where that heaviest rainfall was from the moisture that was coming off of the northern edge of Gamma. So let's talk about these tropical systems. Let's go right now to an animation looking at infrared temperatures here. So this kind of tells us where the deepest convective plumes are in the tropics. Gamma's dealing with a lot of wind shear. As you can see, the northern and northeastern edge getting ripped off toward the northeast here. And even though we keep building these deep convective plumes, this is not staying over the center of circulation, which is to its south and west. So we're going to watch Gamma. I'll show you where Gamma is forecast to go in a few moments. But the second feature is right down here. This was currently Tropical Depression 26, could become Tropical Storm Delta, though, as we go throughout the day today on Monday. So Gamma is forecast to stick around the Yucatan Peninsula. And as you can see here, goes off in this direction, then possibly emerges here just north of the Bay of Campeche, which is right in through this area, gets out into the Gulf. Now, what'll be interesting will be the interaction between Gamma and Tropical Depression 26, or again, could be Tropical Storm Delta. We got a couple of different views here of Delta. The inset figure is from the National Hurricane Center, and then the figure that you see over in the background, that's the European model forecast for where this could possibly go. And I want to show you how well the two align. You do see in general we get something like this out of both. And if you notice, let me take that last drawing off of there, the National Hurricane Center is projecting this to become a hurricane as it gets out into the very warm waters here in the Gulf of Mexico. What will be interesting to watch will be the interplay between Gamma and Tropical Depression 26, again, possibly called Delta. So take a look at this. We're looking at mean sea level pressure, and then the winds about a mile above your head, 850 millibar winds. So this is Gamma, and this is Delta. We might get a bit of what we call the Fujiwara effect as this happens. Let me play that for you again and pause it right here. You see, as Gamma bends down here toward the Yucatan Peninsula, we could kind of fling what would be Tropical Storm Delta just to the north of it and actually pull it on around into this part of the Gulf of Mexico. You'll see that as I play this forward, that seems to be what the operational European model wants to happen. Now, at this point, there's a lot of uncertainty, so I don't want any of you watching this to think that we've got this one pinned down yet. As this gets here into this region of the Gulf of Mexico, we could undergo some pretty rapid intensification, bringing this up to a Cat 1, 2, maybe even a Category 3 strength hurricane. But what will be interesting will be to see how it makes its northward turn, possibly impacting the Louisiana coast. What I would say is that as of very early in the morning on Monday, I would watch this entire coastline for potential interaction. That's how much uncertainty I think we still have given the spread in the ensemble members. But it eventually gets pulled in through parts of Louisiana and then cuts into parts of Mississippi, Alabama. And this again is a region that had Tropical Storm Beta and Hurricane Sally go through in the last month. So if we just put that into the context of what we started this video with, I now want you to see the full picture. Ready? So we have all the action down here in the Caribbean. Here are our three lows. See 1, 2, 3, with the ridge that's over the north, to the north of them. There's this trough and that trough. Now watch what's going to happen here. As I play this forward, let me pause it there. You can see that through the early part of this week, this deeper trough now cut through parts of Japan and is heading over toward the Bering Sea. We still have our parent upper level trough sitting here over the Hudson Bay and the downstream blocking that we talked about last week over parts of Europe, still keeping Europe very unsettled. In fact, a lot of reports of some bad flooding in parts of France as a result of that trough. But let's come back to see how this pattern changes. And again, I want your focus right here. You see, as we move this forward, getting into Wednesday and Thursday, look at what happens. We've now changed the pattern here because of the influence of this trough. We now have broad troughing extending from, well, the Aleutian Islands and the Bering Sea right through the Gulf of Alaska. And what that means is the pattern downstream across much of North America warms up as the action dips south here off of the west coast and off of the east coast. And there is what could be Tropical Storm or Hurricane Delta. See it? As we play this forward, notice what happens. The trough you see here, this was the one that was over Japan. This is by Friday morning. The operational European model sweeps it through the Gulf of Alaska, and the southern side of this kicks this wave here, which was once 3 separate waves out in the underneath that ridge, kicks it right into Northern California and sweeps right into this area. Then the broader wave comes plowing through the Pacific Northwest, increasing rainfall chances. So what I'm trying to say is by the end of this week, major warm up in the midsection of the country and dry. That trough that was over Japan then eventually is the main driving mechanism to kick that big ridge that's over the west and all the heat that's in the west out, bringing in the first meaningful chance of rainfall for California, much of the northern 2/3 of California, and then also the Pacific Northwest. But with a trough like that sweeping through, look at what happens by the time I get you out here to next Monday, next Tuesday. It's going to sweep through the midsection of the country, and I want to talk about the precipitation changes because of that next. So through the next 5 days, this is what we've got. Most of the action will be with these little clipper systems that are running here along the US-Canada border. That's the GFS I'm drawing over here, almost the exact same thing shown in the European. And then you can see both models are attempting to take the heaviest rain from what could be Delta right here into the same location. So we've got some pretty good model agreement overall at this point on where this is going to be going. Outside of that, much of the rest of the country is very dry. So days 5 through 10, that's October 10th to the 15th, that's when the wave cuts into the northwestern part of the United States and then emerges somewhere here in the central United States as what's left of Delta exits over in this direction. Now, you notice that the models are still keeping a section of the country right in through here very dry. And I'd like to point out that over the last couple of weeks, that area, I'll draw it in white here, has been extremely dry, and we're concerned about getting this winter wheat crop going. You can also see how dry it's been in California, all right? So just to put a point to this, compared to normal, not normal, but to the last 128 years, this section of the country right in through here is running in a top 5 driest such time period on record. And so we're going to see if any precipitation could possibly come in there because it's going to be critical to that winter wheat crop in that area. You just saw that through the next 10 days, things don't look as likely. Let's at least take a look at the operational European model to put these pieces together. This high pressure cell that you see sitting here over the central and eastern Corn Belt, this is helping bring in a frost this morning. Very light winds, but those strong southerly winds on the backside warming things up quickly in this area. This is gamma here. Delta is still off down here in the Caribbean. As we play this forward, let's pause it right here. We're working our way through the middle of this week. We then see that interesting interaction. Look down there in the Caribbean, right? The interaction between gamma ducking south and Delta running right here into the central part of the Gulf of Mexico. Meanwhile, we're just going to watch the little systems sneak through the U.S.-Canada border, bringing in chances of precipitation to parts of Ontario, but also clipping Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, and then coming in here to the northeast. You're going to see that right there. See it? Now, as we work our way toward Thursday morning, Thursday afternoon, and evening, it appears that this could be the time, Thursday night, Friday morning, that we'll get what could be Delta coming into Louisiana. And it seems to be there by Friday morning while we watch yet another system clip here along the U.S.-Canada border. Now, at this point, that system could get pulled to the north as this high pressure cell builds off of the east coast. So that's going to be the steering current pulling that to the north. That puts heavy rains in parts of Mississippi, but also over here to Alabama and Tennessee. And that's going to cut right there over toward the Appalachian Mountains, heading toward the Carolinas and Virginia. Now, at this same time, here we are on Saturday evening. That's when all of those waves I kept telling you about out in the open Pacific cut into this section of California, Oregon, and Washington. And this could be some desperately needed rain for this area. Now, as that cuts through, what we're going to be questioning is how things emerge early next week in the midsection of the United States with the formation of this low pressure center here. Too much uncertainty to know exactly where this is going to be. But the ensembles are pretty keen on bringing that trough through. So there's the GFS, there's the European, and as a result, they want to kick off a low somewhere in here, dragging a cold front to its south. Unfortunately, the models are still keeping things back here where I'm shading in dry, but we could get moisture transport and even some strong thunderstorms ahead of this. But again, I'm out here way into early part of next week looking at this forecast. From there, let's just look exclusively at the model's forecast for week 2. You can see that they both want to bring that low through, and that's why you see this area wet. That's the GFS. Here is the European model. And so there is some consistency there. But if you notice, the European model is a bit different in the GFS, still wanting to track moisture here and also bring in another wave into the Pacific Northwest, which is kind of similar to what the GFS has, but the patterns do deviate somewhat as we get fully into week 2. So let's talk about temperatures. We'll take a look at where we've got this morning our frost advisories out. This is all air quality in these areas, okay? We can see here that the temperatures as of about 3:10 this morning when I was producing this had already begun to bottom out in this area. And where you see this blue shade in through here, that is where I indicate where we've got temperatures already below freezing. It's interesting to see this. You notice that right there, tucked into there, see how those open circles? Those are clear skies and calm winds. And that's what it took to get those temperatures now down to about that 31 to 30 degree mark here through parts of Illinois, Indiana. But it's windy on either side of it and also cloudy to the east, and that's what's keeping it from getting below freezing in those areas. Let's watch our temperatures change though, and we're only going to look at high temperatures now because the probability of another frost this week is relatively low as this pattern changes. So here's Monday's high temperatures. You can already see the effect of those southerly winds here. Remember we showed it at the beginning? That's the effect of those southerly winds warming things up. So we go from Monday into Tuesday, broad warm up for much of the United States here. And it sticks around for Wednesday. Now, we got one little clipper that comes through, remember? So brief cool down here, but we're going to go back over to those nice warm end of summer temperatures here by Wednesday. Getting into the day on Thursday, the first system goes into the northeast, cools things off. But then we see a rebound in temperatures Friday for the midsection of the country. As we get into Saturday, that's where the wave starts to cut into the west. The cloud cover, the precipitation, the cooler temperatures here. As we look out to the 6 to 10 day time period, we can see that pattern opening up with that larger ridge in the midsection of the country. So days 6 through 10, a real warm up here as the west coast goes back over toward a cooler pattern with that trough. And then as we look out here to the 11 to 15 day, interesting bit of difference here between the GFS and the European. The European still extending more normal but slightly above average temperatures into that corridor. The GFS is actually closer to normal, even a little bit cooler in through there. So you can kind of see some similarities, but there are some differences. Since we're talking about temperatures, I'm going to wrap up with a bit about South America and Europe. What we see here is that over the next 5 days, we're continuing to see the very, very high temperatures in parts of Brazil's southern and central growing areas. And we're still seeing over the next 5 days, very dry conditions here with the wettest conditions down here along a front that's parked right here over parts of like Paraná and Rio Grande do Sul. But as we look out into exclusively week 2, we do see evidence of the monsoonal precipitation returning. So this would be the rains that need to come back to get the planting to really start to crank up here. It will be from this point moving forward that because of that La Nina, we're going to be more concerned about drought development in Argentina and southern Brazil. So let's keep that in mind. Finally, I would like to just comment on Europe. We do know we have had some major flooding in parts of France, and given that the pattern is still blocked up, we're still talking about very wet conditions in through here. But as you get over into the Russian wheat belt and parts of eastern Ukraine, where we've had over the last 45 days a massive deficit in precipitation, you saw on the map over there on the left that through the next 10 days it's forecast to continue to stay dry despite some light showers that did move through that area. So we'll wrap it up there. Hope you all have a great week. Look forward to giving my long range update on Wednesday because we have brand new long range European data to talk about. I'll talk to you then. Thanks.